Shalom and greetings again, friends. Thank you for clicking on part 3 titled Creator's New Year Calendar. And it is January 1st, 2013. Happy New Year! Or, according to which calendar? Calendar that humanity has going by today, the majority? The Gregorian calendar? What about our Creator's calendar? And how is that different? Well, as I pointed out in part 1 and part 2, our Creator's calendar starts in the spring, but humanity has departed from our Creator's ways. And we have departed from truth. And we need to restore truth as it becomes lost, as it becomes hidden. And humanity likes to pick the darkest time of the year, generally. The coldest time of the year, generally. And so we have chosen, how symbolically is that? A dark and cold month, where most of death and vegetation in the northern hemisphere, where all the scriptures were written in the northern hemisphere, where our Creator's calendar starts in the spring with newness of life. We have newness of life. As we say, love is in the air. Growth is beginning. Restoration is beginning all over again in cycles. Our Creator goes in cycles, and circles are important to Him, and cycles, and the symbolism, the physical being a pattern for our spiritual walk and way of life to be transcended into our eternal life in relationship with our Creator. And so, in part 1 and 2, I expounded upon the Hebrew, and also his calendar as we start observing his holy days, or I'm starting to call them holy dates, because our Creator is asking you out on a date. Not just one date, but He likes multiple dates with in a deep relationship, a romantic spiritual relationship with Him. And every day is important in a good relationship all year round, of course. And we have to walk in faithfulness in our relationships. But even we as humans like anniversaries. We like rehearsals of important dates. We like to have birthdays to celebrate and give honor to special dates in our life, in those who we love. And so our Creator, as I pointed out in part 1 and 2, and if you haven't heard it, please go back and listen to it. Our Creator, since Genesis chapter 1 verse 14, has preordained dates far in advance, long before the Jewish people ever existed, before Israel, before even Abraham and Esau, or we say Isaac today. And so these are important dates. They have prophetic meanings. And those who are anti-Semitic will call them Jewish days. And those who are anti-Semitic will go to Paul's writings to try and nullify, do away, and say that these days are curses to follow. But as I expounded upon Romans chapter 14, and what was Paul really talking about? He wasn't talking about Shabbats or any of his holy dates that he has asked us out on each year to keep in special memory and meaning and purpose. And in Colossians chapter 2 is where I left off in part 2 of this topic. And so, as I was saying here, he says here in Colossians 2, in verse 16, "Therefore let no one judge you in food and drink or in regard to a festival, feast days, holy days, a new moon, or Sabbaths," Shabbats, "which are a shadow of things to come." Now, was Paul saying, don't let anyone judge you so that we could just be like Israel and do what's right in our own eyes with blinders on, or what's in our own hearts and what we want to do? Or who has sovereignty over time in our hearts and in our minds? Or His ways or His timing? Do you want to be on His timing or your timing? And would you like your timing to be in alignment with His timing? As for me and my household, our family, we want to be on His timing, and we know that these are important days. They are shadows of things to come. Like Paul says, shadows. Why does he say shadow? What could be metaphorically or as a parable explained in more depth from a shadow? Well, a shadow is not the real thing, right? Think of your own shadow. It's not really you. It's not the real thing, but it gives an outline. And it is a darkened view. Like Paul says, we see through a glass darkly elsewhere in Scripture, dimly. We don't know exactly what we're going to be in the kingdom with spirit bodies, something similar to the angels, but greater as it's prophesied than even the angels, if we can walk this walk and talk this talk. And as Messiah said, for those who endure to the end shall be saved. So we can have salvation today, we can be saved today and justified, but it's so that we can be cleansed and continually walk in His ways, and we have to do our part in that relationship with Him. And if someone asks you out on a date or sets an appointment with you and you're not faithful to those special times and special appointments, well, how good is that relationship going to be? And so we look at a shadow. Now, in order to have a shadow, there has to be light. Light has to shine on the real thing to give a shadow of an outline of the real thing, but the shadow is not the real thing. So the Sabbaths, the holy dates, the new moons are all a shadow. They give us physical reminders. They're physical, special, appointed times with meanings of futuristic, awesome plans of salvation. And each one has a meaning to it, not to be lost or forgotten. Now, how many of you want to forget your anniversaries or birthdays? Well, let's not forget His. These are appointed times. These are, as we also say, they are rehearsals of the future. Wedding, and also wedding is part of it. From the crucifixion of the Lamb of our Creator all the way to the 7th annual Shabbat, we see the plan of salvation for humanity. And I'll get into that soon. The video teaching will be put out on that soon, and you can search it. There's many others teaching it. There's some slight differences in beliefs and what these days represent, but they're still important. I want to encourage you to seek it. The enemy's always going to provide counterfeits. He's always going to provide things that look like the real thing, but he's going to deviate it and change it to a degree. So let's get back to restoring what our Creator has foreordained and how these are a shadow of things to come. But notice at the end of verse 17 in Colossians chapter 2, it's a continuation of the earlier words here. He says, but the substance of Messiah. So in other words, therefore, let no one judge you. And he's speaking to, as I pointed out as we see in part 2, he's speaking to Gentiles who are in a Gentile world. But let the body of the Messiah, the substance of our Messiah, judge you in these things. And whether you like it or not, He is our judge. He is our Redeemer. And we are going to stand before Him someday, literally. And do you want Him to say to you, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in little. Now be faithful. I'll give you over much more to come. So there's a whole lot more to come. But let's be faithful to what He says. He says, pray and watch always that you may be counted worthy. Not that you are counted worthy, but you may be, you might be counted worthy to escape these things to come and stand before Him. So should we take the Protestant view that it doesn't matter which day, don't let anybody judge you, and just take that little part out of the context and say, well, don't let anyone judge you. These feast days and new moons and holy dates are part of that curse of the law. We don't have to keep those anymore. Just keep them whenever it's convenient for you and do what's right in your own eyes. And that's really, when you take it to its logical conclusion, that's the Protestant interpretation and doctrine of these scriptures. But it does not agree. It's not compliant with the Apostle Paul's other earlier writings. In Hebrews chapter 4, we see, as our Creator rested on the seventh day, you also rest from your works on the seventh day. And so the seventh day Shabbat, not the worship of the sun god that the Greeks and the pagans in Babylon worship, but according to His timing, He has all sovereignty over timing. And Yeshua, the Son of the Creator, says in Matthew, as we say in Hebrew, 24:20, says, pray that your flight, referring to the end of this age, go back to verse 3 of chapter 24, and the disciples ask Him, what are the signs of the end of the age? And He says, pray that your flight be not in the winter, man has no authority or control over the seasons, or on the Shabbat, or any Shabbat day, as He said. So His Shabbats, His appointed times, are still important, prophesied by our own Messiah. The Apostle Paul also in Hebrews chapter 4 makes it clear that we need to follow the same Shabbats, and they're symbolic of a future rest, a future 1,000-year millennial rest. They point back to the Creator and following His example long before the Jews ever existed, and also in Isaiah chapter 66, verses 22 and 23, where it says, with a new heavens and a new earth, which will be restored, which has not happened yet, on every Shabbat and every new moon, all flesh, not just the Jewish people or Israel, but all flesh, including the Gentiles who want to be grafted in, all flesh will come before Him as special dates that He's invited you to. And He invites us. So if they were kept in the past, they're going to be kept in the future. Our Messiah warns us not to just let anything happen on these Shabbats. Pray that our flight, our difficult travels, our difficult time periods, any exodus should not be done on the Shabbat. Of course, there's oxes in the ditch. He also points that out. But let's not push that ox into the ditch. Let's not just allow it to happen every week. If that ox is falling in the ditch every week, well, you need to get another ox, or you need to tie him up, or keep him gated a little better, and protect that ox from just going in every week. But accidents happen. There are unusual circumstances of events, and so our Creator understands all these things, but we are also warned to be careful of these things, and do your best to do as He tells us to do, not according to man's ways, but according to His ways. As we see in Isaiah chapter 55, I think it's around verses 8 and 9, 10, He says, my ways are not your ways, nor are my ways your ways, for my ways are higher than the heavens are above the earth. Than our puny human ways would think that we know better, think that He's going to love us anyway, regardless of what we do. Just believe in Him and we'll be saved. That's the lie that goes back to Genesis. The serpent told Eve, you will not die. You have salvation. You're going to live forever. Don't believe those commandments that he told you. You can eat of this tree. It's going to give you knowledge and information and salvation, and you're going to be like him. And so that lie, he will manipulate and change to fit whatever society, whatever culture, and he wants us to believe in this immortal soul, that we have immortal souls. Please beware. As I point out in part number 2 of this series, in order to know the end, we got to know the beginning. As we go back to the beginning, we can see the same lies, the same deceptions. We can see that tree of knowledge of good and evil. It's not just an evil tree. It has good and evil. It's got both, and that's how he gets us deceived. In order to counterfeit, you have to have a lot of the real truth and a lot of the real thing involved to camouflage and hide the evil and the errors and how it's not valid or good. And he wants us to believe these things. So I warn you, as I should, as his servant, and I hope that we can walk in his ways, walk in all his ways. You know, his commandments, as in Colossians 2, were not nailed to the cross. You know, it's the penalties of breaking those commandments, the dogma that people come up with that are against it. Anything that's anti-Semitic, that's deviates and goes away from the Hebraic understanding and the faithfulness that is from the old, that from faithful men and women of old, we are to try to walk. And our father Abraham, he's the father of the faithful. And we see in James chapter 2 that, you know, Abraham wasn't just saved by faith only. And of course, he wasn't perfect either. He wasn't saved by works only or obedience only. So to understand salvation and everything, we need to understand both. And as we see in Revelation, we see the commandments are not a curse to us. They are for our good. If we go to Revelation chapter 14 and verse 12, here is the patience of the saints, the true believers. The endurance, the patience of the saints. Here are those who keep the commandments of our Creator and have the testimony or the faith of Yeshua, or as some of you know his Greek name is Jesus, but the Mashiach. So you have to keep the commandments and have faith. Backing up to verse 17 of chapter 12 of Revelation. And Paul wrote this, or no, John, Yochanan, his Hebrew name, wrote the book of Revelation 20 years, at least 20 years after all the other apostles were martyred, and our Creator wanted that for a reason of his glory, not their own, but out of mercy and purposes, he preserved John, Yochanan. And he writes in chapter 12 and verse 17, and the dragon was enraged with this faithful woman, and he went to make war against the rest of her offspring who keep the commandments of our Creator and have the testimony of the Mashiach, the Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach, who's at the right hand of our Father up in heaven. And so we need to understand that these days are important. And if you want to understand a little bit more about the Shabbats, the history, how they changed, and go through the scriptures in more detail, please go to our free article that I've written and posted on our website. It's at www.torah, T-O-R-A-H, truthseekers.org, O-R-G. And you go to our free articles, and you'll see Father and Son's Shabbats. Just like we have Father and Son's businesses, and as our Messiah, the Son, was doing his Father's business and keeping his Father's commandments, he tells us to do likewise. So if you want to know what the faithful Son taught in regard to the Shabbats in more detail, and also Paul, or we say Shaul in Hebrew, and the rest of the Brit Hadashah and the Old Covenant Scriptures, please go to that free article. Also, I have a booklet. It's about 60 pages, and that is called. You'll go to over onto the meat of the Word. It's a little meaty and not so much milk, and that's on the other side. You'll see I have it titled Creator's Sacred Hebrew Calendar. And you'll see that free online reading. You can copy and paste, just don't distort or take out of context anything. I have copyrights on that. So please feel free to go to that. And eventually, probably my next assignment today is to go through and I could figure out in advance with knowing modern astronomy and tools, as I point out in the book, even using NASA website, I could predict when the future new moons will be a lot more accurately in 2013. I'm going to post that soon. And also the holy dates that he has invited you to this year, this coming year during 2013. And then I, of course, reference to the Gregorian calendar because we all understand that and can pinpoint and have those times in agreement on the proper appointed times, the Moedims, as I pointed out in part 1, the Moedims of according to his calendar and his timing. And so that'll be based upon the western United States, the hemisphere over here in the northern hemisphere. If you want Jerusalem timing, you can go to Michael Rood's website, and he puts out a really good calendar called the Creator's Calendar. And he likes to do everything from Jerusalem. And you can also, I teach you how to do it if you want to go by local timings for days and months and years as well, to be in compliance with that. So please continue to learn and grow, because he has invited you on a date. More than one date, many dates. These are special appointed times. And we can come before the New Jerusalem on any of those dates today. Even if we can't make it to the physical Jerusalem, there is a spiritual Jerusalem that the Apostle Shaul talks about, where his angels are, where his throne is. Even in prayer, you can come before him anytime, any day of the year. But let's not forget these special appointed times, these anniversaries, these rehearsals that are just shadows of things to come, and we can learn and grow spiritually and have a relationship with him and say, okay, I accept your invitation. I want to go out on every date that I can with you, not just every day of the year, of course, but the special appointed times that are more important than even my own anniversaries and my own birthdays and these human anniversaries that we have today. We want the spiritual ones with you, which you preordained all the way back from Genesis chapter 1 and verse 14, that you've created this clock up in the sky to observe from here on earth, so that I can know these appointed times, that I can keep them and be in alignment with you, and to have a deeper, more meaningful relationship with you, and to transcend into all eternity. Not to be saved by works, but to just out of love and devotion and know that you want these days. And they are future, past, present, and future for all of us.